Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Rangers review special, a book review special, if you like. We're going to look at the recently released Alfie Conn autobiography, which has been expertly written by our good man here, Jeff Holmes, who joins us. Jeff, great to have you on. How are you doing?
Thank you very much, Derek. Nice introduction, eh? Expert. Wow. No, I like it. I like it. Glad to be here, Derek.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you on, Jeff. Always good to talk all things at Rangers with you. And before we crack on with the book itself and what people can expect, you've got a little ribbon round your neck containing a medal. You were at a very prestigious event at Ibrox last night.
So I have. Look, I didn't realise I had that on, Derek. Sorry. That was great. It was a True Blue Hero Award for the Rangers Charity Foundation. And I think it was October, November last year. Stephen Miller from the Rangers Archives and I brought out a book called All About the Rangers, which was a wee sort of landscape-style book on cartoon strips that Stephen had come across in the Daily Express from 1960. It was our history up to 1960 in pictures, and we turned it into a wee book, and we made just under £4,000. We made everything went to charity. So we gave £2,000 to Alzheimer's Scotland, and just a pure coincidence, £1,872 went to the Rangers Charity Foundation. So,
wow.
So it was good, and so we went to. I think India raises over £150 as invited to this do at Ibrox. So it was really good. Took Rick Russell along, one of my friends, and we went into the members' lounge for a reception beforehand and some soft drinks and some chat. Then we went into the Thornton suite, and it was young Ross McCausland and who was the other boy? Robbie Williams. the other Robbie Fraser, is it? That's breaking into the first team at the moment. And the two of these boys were giving out the medals, and they were really lovely boys. So I just hope Ross McCausland's already in the first team, but it'd be good to see Robbie do it as well, because they were an absolute pleasure. You know, they were just looked happy to be there. Then after that, it was back in Conor Cochrane, the top man from the foundation, gave a speech about all the work they do, and they did a presentation. And then we went back into the members' lounge and had a hot meal, nice steak pie and potatoes and some more drinks, and sat and had a chat. So it was really good. It was a couple of hours, but it was perfect. They put on a great presentation for us, and then they gave us some drinks and food. So it was really, really good. And can I take this off now, Derek? Is that okay?
You can take it off if you want. I don't know if it was stuck to you now for the foreseeable future. yeah.
Slept through it last night.
Did you get a chance to look at the Copeland stand, Jeff? Is it? I've seen pictures of it. It looks like it's in completion.
I didn't. I forgot. I'm terrible. My memory is really bad now. And when we went in, the door was open. The door from the members' lounge that leads up to the just in front of the director's box. The door was open. A lot of people were going out for a look, but we didn't go out. I should have went out and taken some photographs because it was a nice night. But no, to my
don't hold that against you. I've seen pictures anyway. It looks like at long last we'll be back there before we know it. But it's certainly good to work.
It's just something, Derek, that's taking time, and I know that there was a problem with the steel and maybe the misordering of it, or doing it too late or whatever. But I got a programme in this morning. This is the only thing I collect now, is the Rangers home programme.
Oh, class! When's that from? 1947
to 1969, when they had the teams in the front. That's all I collect. And there's a bit in here I had a quick look at, and it was, a start's been made in the floodlights. I don't know if that's the right way around, but it says, a start's been made in the floodlights, and they're putting floodlights in, and they're going to have the best floodlights, and Arsenal will come and open it, and it won't be a friendly because of what we try to win. And it says it's just going to take time, and we'll, once it's finished, it's finished. We have a date. It should be 5 weeks away. But this is September, or 12th of September, so is that not today?
That is,
12th of September 1953. So,
wow.
And it just takes what it takes. I know there's plans, and they say it'll be finished in 5 weeks and all the rest of it. And sometimes problems crop in, and we just have to. Sometimes some supporters just want to bash them for, me included sometimes. But sometimes people just want to bash anything to do with the club for some reason. It's a bit strange, but there you go.
Yeah. Talking about old programmes, I have a fair collection myself, Jeff. Actually, I've pinpointed. I'm going down to Northampton, which you'll find outside Northampton's ground there's a programme seller. He sells old programmes. You'd love it. You'd be in there. It's a treasure trove. You'd be in there all day. So Bolton play down there on the 1st of October. Cannot wait to get down there. So I'm going to go in there. I bought a few last season. Don't think they're as old as that, right enough, but it's always intriguing to have a wee read through, isn't it, from Rangers teams of yesteryear.
Oh, do they sell programmes from every club, or just old programmes?
Yeah, it's from every club. Yeah, so it's
I've never been there, so I'll try and get down there. That'd be nice. And apparently, what is it? It's not. I don't think it's Maidenhead. Is it Wealdstone that have an incredible shop as well? I need to try and do that as well. I think it's Wealdstone, and they have a shop that has apparently a treasure trove as well. So when I was in the committee up at Maryhill Juniors a couple of years ago, I started a shop like that because Auchinleck Talbot had won, and this boy ran, and he ended up just with he started off with just a table and ended up with 2 porta cabins, and people were donating. I donated some programmes as well, and all the funds went to the club, and it was just, you went in there and you just looked about. People would go down to Auchinleck Talbot game and just spend the whole day in and not even watch a match.
Could easily do
and
that.
It was brilliant, and the money it raised for Auchinleck Talbot was fantastic. So it's it's a double-edged thing. So it's quite good.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, let's get stuck in then, because the book, this is it, folks. The Alfie Conn, what's it all about? The Alfie Conn story. Controversial figure, it's fair to say, in Scottish football down the years. Ex-Rangers, started his career at Rangers, then moved down south and played for Spurs, was part of that wonderful Rangers side that won the European Cup Winners' Cup in Barcelona. Moved to Spurs and had a spell down there. He's highly thought of down there before coming back up the road and playing for the other half of Glasgow. He played for Celtic, of course, under Jock Stein for a little bit before then moving on. He had spells, of course, after that. He went abroad. He played in America for a little bit and then came back. He played for Hearts for a spell in Motherwell. Blackpool as well. But this is it's a fascinating book, Jeff. It's not someone that of course he played before my time, but he's always someone that you're aware of, but you rarely hear from. So was this always a book that you were keen to get written at some point? Did you track Alfie for some time?
No, it was a mutual friend, Stan Gordon, that runs the Stonefield Tavern in Blantyre. One of the best Rangers pubs in Scotland. And Stan's pals with Alfie, and Stan had got in touch with me and says, look, I think Alfie's ready to do a book. He'd knocked back several offers to do a book because he's just not one of these guys that puts himself out there, Derek. No. He just wants to live a quiet life. Still gets grief for what he did nearly 50 years ago, but that's up to the people that give him the grief. And he just wanted, but then his wife died 3 years ago this November, and she died of motor neuron disease, and it's a particularly horrible way to go. And he's thought recently that he did a fundraiser in his local pub in Coatbridge, and he got most of the Barca Bears down to it, and they all came, and it was a fantastic success. The likes of Dave Smith apparently lives somewhere near Aberdeen, out in the middle of nowhere, but made it down to Coatbridge on a Friday night. And the guys all had a great time, and they raised a lot of money. So he thought, I could maybe do this now. But it was a tough gig for me, which I'll explain about in a wee while. But to answer your first question, I like a wee challenge. I do like a wee challenge. I like something that's a bit different. It has to get my juices flowing as well as, and you've got to think about the people that are going to be reading it, and you want to make it as interesting for them as possible. You want to find out as much about Alfie that people don't know, and probably, it's a bit like the time I did Sam English, and a lot of people thought, oh, Sam English, that's the guy that killed the Celtic goalkeeper, and then it really it was a raw deal for Sam because it was an accident, clearly, but it was good to put it right and put Sam's side of the story over, and in this case it was good to put Alfie's side of the story over. And because people, one of the first things I asked him when I met him for the first time was, why did you go to Celtic? I thought, let's get this out of the way first and foremost. then we'll drink our coffee, and we sat and chatted about it. And I says, okay, well, I'll forgive you. Let's crack on with the book. Forgiveness before we write the book. But he's just a lovely, lovely guy with a good story to tell, and it was a bit, again, like Marco Negri's book I did. Marco had decided fairly early on in his Rangers career that he wasn't going to speak to any journalists because he was quite moody, but also because he had a raw deal in Italy when he was one at Perugia, I think it was, and one journalist told some lies about him, and he thought, I don't talk to journalists anymore, and that's fine. So it meant that I had a free run at it because I didn't know an awful lot about Marco. And it's that old thing, you probably came across it, Derek. People will say, well, I've been trying to find a book about such and such, but there's not one in the market, so I'll just write it myself, you know. And so to me, it's more about the story than the individual. And if there's a good story there, then let's crack on and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. The son, of course, of a famous father, also by the name of Alfie, played for Hearts. He was part of the terrible trio. But as a player, Alfie Conn Jr., Jeff, did you watch him at any point on the pitch? What was it like as a player?
I mean, I started watching Rangers in 1970, so I seen Alfie, and I thought he was a tremendous player, which was part of the reason I was so annoyed when he joined Celtic, because like thousands of other Rangers fans, I thought he was going to be coming back to us. When he left Spurs in 74, I think it was 74. No, 77. He left. I can't remember. That's a memory already.
77.
So when he left, obviously Spurs for 3 years. So he left Rangers, Spurs for 3 years, and then he's coming back to Celtic. He's coming back to Scotland, and Rangers fans are singing, "Alfie's coming home," blah blah blah, and then he goes to Celtic. So you're like a bit, but the reason I was really upset that he'd gone to Celtic was because he was a really good player. You know, I know injuries were kicking in at that time, but that wasn't something, you know, as a sort of 14, 15-year-old, that was really bothering me too much. It was just, this guy's kind of flamboyant player. He'll come and he'll just take people on. The shirt's outside the shorts, the socks are at the ankles, you know, a wee drop of the shoulder. There wasn't many of these players about, Derek, so up here, certainly in Scotland. So it was a blow when he went to Celtic mainly for that reason, you know.
I mean, prior to that, he burst on the scene, didn't he? I mean, he was played at such a young age, coming through at Ibrox. He was given his opportunity, and brilliant responsibility for him to play in that European Cup Winners' Cup final. He was just 20, wasn't he, at Barcelona?
That's right. Right.
One of the youngest members of the side. But it just shows you how highly thought of he was by the coaching staff at Ibrox at the time, just to play him in such a game of that magnitude.
I think they did that then with players. I mean, I think it was Scott Simon that signed him, but then Scott Simon left not long after that. He didn't have much dealing with Scott Simon, and then Davy White came in, and Davy White believed in him and gave him his debut against Dundalk in 1968. But then it was a while before he played for the first team again. But he'd come through, you know, the season before Barcelona and then the Barcelona season, although he still wasn't what you would term probably a regular in the team. It was maybe the 2 seasons after that where he became a regular. But they obviously, I mean, Willie Waddle obviously had faith in him that he could come in and do a real job. And I remember there was 3 players up for, you know, it was Derek Parlin was talked about, Andy Penman for that role in the Barcelona game because they knew Colin Jackson was going to be out, and then there was a doubt over John Gregg's fitness. So there was definitely one place up for grabs, and just before they left for Barcelona, they played St Mirren at Love Street in a friendly, and apparently the man Willie Thornton, who was taking the team, had says, look to his counterpart at St Mirren, don't hold back, you know, and apparently they didn't, you know. But Conn scored a hat trick that night, and I think that really put his name in the frame for the last spot in Barcelona, and well, you know, he'd played in the 1970 League Cup final, 70 League Cup final when Derek Johnson scored the only goal against Celtic, you know, and then go on to play in the 73 Scottish Cup final, which was regarded as one of our best wins over them. Even though it was 3-2, I thought it was a wider margin on the day. You know, he scored a really important goal in that game, so he was a big game player, and he had a big game temperament, and he certainly, maybe because of his dad, but he never ever seemed to be overawed. He was, as a kid breaking through, he was respectful and all that, but he was never really overawed.
See this cup. See the cup. Is it the '73 Cup final? When I was reading the book, the attendance. It goes into detail. It says it was 122,000 people crammed into Hampden. That's you can't comprehend the enormity of that. Really, I mean, you look at the attendances these days, Jeff, and of course, safety is paramount now. It's all-seated stadia, just a little over 52,000, I think it is at Hampden. But double that, almost triple that inside that ground. Were you there that day at all? The cup final that year?
I credit that day with me being 6'4" because I don't think I was 6'4" when I was 12 and I was in the Rangers end, and I was crushed that much that I think they squashed me and I just went up the way, and I suddenly became a 6 foot plus in 90 minutes. But it's funny because I was talking to David Mason, the Rangers historian, at the start of the week. We had a wee coffee, and he was saying he reckons there was another 20,000 in that day. People were on it. It was like people climbing over the walls, and it was just the place couldn't handle it. And there was thousands more outside. It really was. My first game at Hampden was 1969, Scotland v Germany, and there was 90-odd thousand there, and I was in the Rangers end that night as well. And it was actually terrifying because the crowd was so dense. And as you say, health and safety, but there wasn't really any. I don't think there was any much thought given to that. But that day, there was an extra 30,000 in the ground that day at least. And it was. There's a great photograph of Alfie scoring a goal and Billy McNeil lying sitting on his backside watching him, and the vast crowd in the background. It's in the book, and you just look and you can just see all these wee dots, and that's people's heads, and it's just it's actually quite frightening when you look back at the crowd that day and think. I think that was the last 100,000 crowd in Scotland. So, wow, what a day! I mean, it's big time for Scythe's winning goal, wasn't it? It was just phenomenal. But But Alfie was a doubt for the second half because he had a niggle, and and the manager says to him, "How are you?" And he says, "Well, I'm okay. I want to play on." And he scores something like 30 or 40 seconds into the second half. So it was quite a story. And obviously injury would go on to play quite a part in his career, as you know, Derek. So,
what comes across in the book, Jeff, is his love of Rangers, and that sort of paid. I mean, I give too much away in the book, but he was wanted by the late great Don Revie, wasn't he, as a young kid? So
that's right.
His career path could have been much different to what it was. Rangers coming in, and then I think once Rangers came in for him, it was a no-brainer. He had his heart set on moving to Govan, wasn't it?
Well, he did, and I think they'd just come back from Leeds on the train, Alfie and his mum and his dad, and they get to the house and Scott Simon's waiting to speak to him, and he looks at his dad looks at him, no words, and his dad knows exactly what he has to do. But his dad obviously knew Scott Simon because Alfie Senior was such a big star of Scottish football from the 50s onwards. So I think that helped Alfie in a lot of respects because his old man had the respect of a lot of his peers, because he was such a famous footballer. But it was a no-brainer. He was a Rangers fan growing up in Preston Pans. That's just the way it was, and he's a Rangers fan now. And not a lot. The big bit in the middle is maybe things have fluctuated a wee bit, and I would say. He wasn't a Rangers fan when he was with Celtic, maybe, because I think you just give your employer your all, don't you? And when Maurice Johnson came to Rangers, did he suddenly become a Rangers fan? From a big Celtic fan growing up, was he suddenly a Rangers fan? I don't know, and I think if they give their all, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I think everyone's different, I think, aren't they? And he explains that in the book, the reasoning behind it, which we'll get to shortly. But see, when you say, Jeff, when he was coming back up the road, he was sort of out of favour at Spurs, and he was hoping to come back up to Scotland. I think only 2 teams would be able to afford them. But were you disappointed to begin with him leaving Ibrox at the time? Do you think would you have preferred him to stay on?
Not massively, Derek. Not massively, because we'd also lost Willie Johnson and Colin Stein round about that time as well, and Bud going to West Brom. I think it was West Brom, and Colin Stein went to Coventry. They were quite unfashionable clubs, and it was just part of football that if somebody wants, not necessarily to better themselves, but if they want more money, they're going to have to go south of the border, And I think these teams were playing in the first division at the time, so their wages are going to be upped dramatically, and it improves their standard of living, because the wages at Rangers at that time were pretty dire. You know, they could maybe make 60 quid if they were lucky. You know, you're talking about the 70s. I mean, I started in STV in 1977 and I was on £18 a week, you know. And you think these guys were on 60, there's no a massive amount of difference. I was only a Wayne, you know, and these boys are, I would say, not their pan in training and playing, and they're seen as superstars and stuff. So it wasn't, if you wanted to better yourself, better your standard of living, you went down south. So when he went to Spurs, he'd been at Rangers 6 years, and I thought, he's away to Spurs, and it was all the best. I'd rather he stayed, but he's a good player. But he's away to Spurs, all the best. Bud's away, Steenie's away. You know, the European Cup Winners' Cup team's breaking up. Jock Wallace is signing new players. You know, just it's just natural evolution, and he went down there. And but if I'd thought for a minute he was going to do what he did, then I would have been probably furious, you know, which I was 3 years later when he did come up the road. But Spurs I think Spurs was a good move for him, had it not been for injury again and maybe the occasional disagreement with his manager.
I mean, and that's sort of, when you're reading the book, you don't realise how different the game was back then. I mean, there was no player power really. He just hot-footed it down. He was just told to get down to London. He never even knew what club he was going to join at that point, Jeff, which seems bonkers now, really. But that's the way it was back then.
It's hard to understand, isn't it?
Yeah,
you're not going to Sweden with the training for the training camp tomorrow, but meet me at the airport because we're going somewhere else. Meets Wally Waddle at the airport and only knows he's going to London because they go into the London queue, you know. But I think he hated the training camp in Sweden. You know, Wally Waddle would say, and Jock Wallace would say, "Oh, it's great for the players because they get all mod cons and they get this." I mean, the coach over in Sweden that they employed made Jock Wallace look like a big Nancy boy, you know, and he was, and they hated it. The players hated it, and they would feign injury to try and not go in the 70-mile runs that were going with a log in their back, you know. So he was probably quite happy to be going to, and he'd wanted away the season before anyway, because him and Jock Wallace were having wee disagreements and, you know, about where they should be playing, and which then carried on later on into their Motherwell days. But you know, so there was a bit of disagreement there, and I think it was probably good for both parties because Rangers got a lot of money, you know, for him, and he went down to London, but again, it's the Spurs manager saying, "Do you want to use the phone to phone your wife?" Aye, okay. Hi, that's me. Transferred. Where are we going? London. Okay. See when you get home, darling. You know, and as you said, just a different time and a different way of doing things.
Yeah, it's nuts. The Celtic move then, it was interesting hearing his reasoning behind it, and I totally get it. He's got his professional hat on. He needs to make a living, of course. And it was also interesting to hear, looking back, he didn't think of the ramifications of it. Like you say, Jeff, some of the abuse that he took just walking in the street and what have you, and things like that, which I guess understandable. You'd imagine that there is supporters out there that wouldn't be willing to accept that, moving to your arch rivals. But I was interested to hear that the main reason behind the move to Parkhead wasn't the club, it was the manager. That's
right. I always had a big respect for Jock Stein, who was his manager for Scotland under-23s, and who he reckoned, in even the short time he was at Scotland under-23s, Jock Stein managed to improve him far more than any other manager or coach had ever done. So there was the professional aspect that it could make him, you know, a better player. And there was also the way Jock Stein apparently treated his players as human beings and looked out for their welfare rather than just their football abilities. I think he believed that, you know, a happy player would be a good player, and he would get allowed it. But there was also a kind of feared side to Jock Stein where he was quite a tough guy, and, you know, he commanded respect, but I think he also earned respect from the players because he treated them right. And I think he wanted to go and sample that. And I suppose it comes down to as well, his options were really limited. And he had let it known to a journalist friend that he was coming back up the road, and he was sort of tasked with sounding out certain people. But then as Alfie says himself, you can't make somebody sign you. You know.
I know. When you played for Celtic, then Jeff, against Rangers, were you in attendance any of those games at all? Was it a weird sight to behold?
It was strange at first, and then as soon as the game starts, you just get into the game.
Yeah.
You know, and then he hit the post with a shot, and he said he got hassle. He come out the ground after it, and he's getting hassle for Rangers fans as per normal. Then he gets hassle for Celtic fans that said, "You meant to hit the post," you know, and he's like, "I really can't win here." So my memory's so bad, Derek, but I'm sure I gave him a bit of pelters as well.
Yeah.
You know,
part of the mob. Blame you.
He's part of the mob, but I think I was in enclosure when he made his I think it's the West enclosure when he made his first appearance at Rangers in a Celtic jersey, and oh my God, the decibel levels went up considerably. Yeah. But in those days, Celtic had the away end, so there was a lot of them to make a noise as well to counteract that. But it was fun in games at the time, I remember. But I think the problem with social media has exacerbated a lot of things because, you know, back in the day, I was talking to a guy about this last night. Back in the day, we would go to the games on the supporters bus from Mary Hill, and you'd go into the club for a few pints before the bus left, and then you'd go to the match, and then you'd go back to the club for a few pints. And you very rarely spoke about the match unless there was something, you know, major talking point. You would just go in and have a laugh with your mates and play pool and have a couple of pints and then up the road, and never really thought about the next game until it came around again. But now it seems to just be wall to wall 24/7. You know, which is great for yourself and podcasts. But it was just a different way of life, I suppose. You know, and so therefore we probably wouldn't have talked about Alfie Conn all that week. Might have somebody might have said when we went back to the club that wasn't there, "Oh, how did Conn get a bit of abuse?" Blah blah blah. But it never really prolonged it, or you never. So it was a different way of life.
Yeah, simpler times. I do miss. Even before the social media age, Jeff. I think life was much simpler back then, and everything's scrutinised to the nth degree now, isn't it? So I wonder if you had made that move nowadays. I mean, not many players have made the made the switch across the divide. The most notable one, of course, is Maurice Johnston. Alfie Conn moved. I think the first post-war player to play for Rangers and Celtic. I think it is, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, it takes some balls to do that, doesn't it, Jeff?
I think so. But he was. I mean, somebody that goes into Willie Waddle's office at 18 years old and asks for a rise, and then more or less demands a rise because he was youth team wages, but he was reserve team wages, but he was playing with the big team, and quite rightly wants the same money as them. But if somebody that does that then goes home, you know, and just says, "Phone me, call me." Somebody that does that, you're always going to think has got the balls to do something like that. But I'm not so sure he, excuse me, I'm not so sure he realised the extent of the backlash would be. And 50 years on, that backlash is still there to a certain extent, which is something I was aware of when I took on the project. And I would go on a couple of Rangers Facebook pages and test the water and post it. And some of the responses were quite vitriolic. And I must admit, there was a lot of people backing him and saying, "Look, it was a long time ago, let it go." And it was starting to cause wee bits of friction between different fans on the Facebook sites. And I kind of did it deliberately because a year on, now that the book's out and stuff, it's really softened. It's such a different reaction now, Derek. It really is. Some people that there are some people that hold the same views, and they've never wavered right from last year when I announced the book. I was doing the book, but an awful lot of people, and most people that have read the book have now said, "You know what? I really didn't like him, but he having read the book, he comes across a decent guy. I now know how he done it. He did it for his family. Blah blah blah. No problem with Alfie Conn at all." And so what I'll do is I met him in Costa in Coatbridge, and we did all the interviews in Costa. I only did about half a dozen, and then I've been met about half a dozen times for him to sign books, and we always go to the same place. And inevitably, at least one, excuse me, Derek, at least one or two people will come up every time we're in and want to talk to him. And it's never anything other than nice conversations, and a few Rangers fans will say, "What did you go to them for?" And these boys are clearly too young to have seen him play. And Alfie says, "So who told you about me playing for Celtic? Your dad?" And they're like, "No, I just seen it on the internet." And what did you go there for? And he's like, "Read the book." And the attitudes have softened towards him, and I'm really pleased about that, because nobody deserves any hassle. And as David Mason says to me the other day, he says, there's a lot of people since Alfie made his move. There's quite a few players, Mark Brown, Kenny Miller, Stephen Presley, these guys that have Mo Johnston have made the move, Rangers to Celtic or whatever he went, and none of them have ever got the same level of vitriol as Alfie Conn did. And they both of us came to the conclusion that might be completely wrong, that he got that level of vitriol because he was a really good player.
Yeah.
And the Rangers, it showed, and I tried to make that point in the book, that he got, had it been a lesser player, no disrespect meant to MD, but had it been a lesser player, people probably wouldn't have bothered, But it shows you the level of frustration that Rangers never went from, because, as I said, Rangers fans were singing his name when it was made clear that he was leaving Spurs and coming back to Scotland. And we all thought he was coming back to Rangers. So there was that expectation. And then when he didn't, and he went to Celtic, it was magnified, amplified, whatever you want to call it. And it was really bad at that time. And I think if nothing had been announced, and if he'd just announced that he was going to Celtic, it would have been bad enough. But I think the fact that Rangers fans thought he was coming back to Ibrox, and then he goes to Celtic, they seen that as some sort of betrayal, more than had he just quietly signed for Celtic in the first place.
Yeah.
So, but I do think it's because he was such a good player that people were angry, frustrated, annoyed. Maybe some of it was an annoyance at Rangers for not signing him, but John Wallace was another one that was his own man and had his own thoughts and would never be railroaded into signing somebody he didn't want. So maybe Alfie just didn't fit into his plans.
Yeah, great thinking. Yeah, quite possibly. You mentioned earlier on, he was a great talent, but sort of hamstrung by injuries, wasn't he? It sort of hampered his time in the game, especially latterly when he just couldn't catch a break, really, couldn't he?
No, it was just, but at that point, it was marking time, but it's a shame, because he says to me he probably missed, I don't know, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
3 or 4 complete years if you add it all up, the times he was injured. And I don't know if some people some players are just made of chocolate or whatever, if it's a bad break or whatever, but there's some players, isn't there, just over the years that have just never caught a break because they're constantly
seem to be injured. Now, Jeff, I think they're in that category. Unfortunately.
I think Alfie was injured more than Daniel Prodan, honestly, and it was for long periods of time. I think he missed a whole year at Spurs, and then I think at first he was okay, but he eventually played the last 3 months of the season and was a phenomenon, and then missed the following season through injury, and then part of the next season through injury, and as you say, I think he was just playing catch up all the time, because perhaps he was coming back too soon and it wasn't given a chance to heal. He had more major operations than any other footballer I know, and it was just non-stop, and that must have been a real source of frustration for him as well, because players want to play, don't they? And and I think it must get inside your head as well, and you must say to yourself, I'm coming back from injury, maybe I shouldn't do this or do that because I might get injured again, and then the wages stop, and it was just an endless cycle, wasn't it? Different complaints.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, he went in, when he called time on his career, I think the doctor told him he was unable to. I think Jock Wallace went to Motherwell, wasn't he? He was there for a brief time, and then he got the old doctor's orders. If he played again, he could be consigned to a wheelchair if he get another knock on his knee or what have you. So it was one of those ones where he had to just hang the boots up. He had a wee bit of coaching, didn't he? An amateur team, but he decided not to go down the coaching route. When he was told he had to go and get his badges, which has obviously changed days now. But maybe a loss to the game coaching wise. He never went into that side of things, Jeff.
Well, he really enjoyed his time. It was at Coatbridge Community Club, I think it was, Coatbridge CC. They were a huge amateur team in the 90s and stuff, and they were winning the Scottish Amateur Cup and stuff. And I suppose if you're with any team, watch a lot of amateur football now, and some of the setups they've got are fantastic, and some of the levels are really, really good. So if you're coaching good players, you know, and you're trying to make them better, and he was bringing simple things to the team. It was his mate that had asked him to help out, and the team were really improving under him. And there was a couple of players that were, you know, had been to a few senior clubs, and they were getting them in maybe at the end of their career, and he was giving them sort of bespoke instructions and training for forwards or midfielders. And they would say, "God, I've never had this in my career." And he's maybe been at, you know, a dozen senior clubs. This is kind of revolutionary. So I think if he'd been given a chance, he would have been really good. You know, he would have did a fantastic job. And Alfie always says at Ibrox, you know, we would do training. He says, and Peter McCloy would do the same training as Willie Johnson. You know, you'd be like, why? You know, and you know, and obviously they cottoned on to you know, goalkeeping coaches and defensive coaches and stuff, which I think just kind of common sense, you know. But he says Big Peter was by far the fastest player at Ibrox until he came, hasn't he? He was one of the fastest as well. Willie Johnson said he was the supreme sprinter at Rangers, but and they would all bet on who was going to. They would go out and run around the track and have wee races, and there would be some of the boys would be the bookies, and they would be taking money off each other and stuff. So I think the spirit between the Barcelona Bears team was just phenomenal. Yeah. And I think that's probably helped him along the way as well, because that was a great season, you know, heading back to that. It was just a wonderful season. And they all still see each other. And a couple of people, I spoke to a mate of mine who's, I won't name him, but he's a big prominent Rangers fan now, and he sponsors them a lot. And I've known him for, you know, 30, 40 years. And he says to me that when there was a Barcelona Bears reunion, he said they really didn't know what to do, whether to invite Alfie or not. He says, I don't know what to do. He says, because, you know, he went to Celtic and blah, blah, blah. And it was like a Bud and Steenie, and says, well, you don't invite him, we're not going. You know, and that was the esteem that Alfie was held in by his peers. Yeah. And then once Alfie was there and had a great time, my mate says, you know, big error of judgment on my part. He went, but he shouldn't have thought that way. He says, it's just I knew they're pals, you know, they're good friends. And I think a lot of people, which we touched on earlier, when he went to Celtic, he was persona non grata with a lot of Rangers fans, and that's okay, because I didn't like Maurice Johnson when he came to Rangers either, you know. So, but mostly because of what happened in the League Cup final with Stuart Monroe and him getting sent off and all that. That stuff, I didn't think he was the kind of player we should have in the team. But he was undoubtedly a good player, you know, and I suppose that trumps all, or maybe it should.
Yeah, totally. And there's actually a great chapter in the book where he goes through his Barcelona Bears teammates and just tells us what they were like as players and men and what have you. So it's a cracking read, Jeff. He's been back to it's quite funny when he tells the story of going back to Ibrox and guys just coming up to him and what have you. But he doesn't go back often, does he? He's still a Rangers fan, of course, but he's not a frequent visitor to Ibrox.
I think he realised that wasn't worth the hassle anymore, Derek. You know, I'd say it'd probably be at Ibrox most weeks if, you know, it wasn't for a lot of the stuff he was taking in the last couple of decades. But he's been a couple of times, and he's been doing hospitality and stuff. He doesn't do it an awful lot, but he does it now and again, and he enjoys it when he goes. He says 99% of the time now, he says it's great banter. He says I made the decision to do what I did, and I think his dad says that you've made your bed, son, you'll need to lie in it. And he went, and I get that. I realise that. He says, but I don't think anybody should take, you know, a terrible amount of grief for 5 decades because it. But he does realise that there will be banter, because that's just the way we do things. And people will say, "Oh, kid him on," and now he's happy. He's happy with that, and he chats back to people and says, "I know," and maybe I made a mistake, maybe I did whatever, you know. And but he gets Rangers and Celtic fans coming up. We spoke to a guy this morning in Costa, and he'd bought the book for his son-in-law, and he said that we were going out and we were speaking to the guy, and he says his son-in-law, absolutely big Celtic fan, he says he absolutely loved it. He went, usually takes him a year to read the book. He says he read it in 2 days because he couldn't put it down. He says, and he learned a lot because he was too young to see Alfie playing. He says, but he learned a lot. He says, and it's a shame he must have had all that hassle when he was playing. He says, but he says, fair play to him for, you know, coming through it. But so you're getting a lot of good feedback from both sides, and Spurs fans in particular have been really vocal about Alfie, and with people actually saying Alfie Conn was the reason they watched football, because he was just so entertaining.
Going down there as well, Jeff, as well as the book sales up here, is you selling it down, going down London at some point?
Well, I've been, because there's a really significant percentage of the royalties going to Motor Neuron Disease Scotland. We decided to take a couple of hundred books and try and sell them ourselves, and they're all away. And the initial print run that the publisher got done is sold out now. Wow. And they're doing a reprint, so that's really positive. And I genuinely think we're going to make a really good sum of money for motor neuron disease, which is great, because that's why I wanted to do it in the first place. And he always says, another pound's a pound nearer getting a cure, because he would love to see something like that happen. So
yeah, it's a horrible disease. So fair play. And if people want to get a copy of it, I think Pitch Publishing, isn't it? I've put the link in the description below this video. I think you can get it on Amazon as well, Jeff.
Well, I would prefer people to buy it from me, Derek, because if Amazon can always offer, because Amazon rule the world, they can always offer it a bit cheaper. But we're giving £3 off the book, or free postage. We're doing a nice Alfie Conn bookmark, which is a nice Alfie Conn bookmark.
There you go.
A signed copy, and money to Motor Neuron Disease Scotland, all of which you can't get on Amazon. So if I could give my email address, Derek, I would.
What we'll do is give us fire away where people can get it then, Jeff.
So it's if people just email me on Jeff, JEFF.Holmes, HOLMES, 4 at btinternet.com, then I'll organise a signed copy with the bookmark and the free postage and stuff, and get it sent out. Get Alfie to sign it and get it sent out a couple of days after it's ordered. And done over 200 so far, and it's been great. The reception's been great, and it's been one of my favourite books to work on. And there's been a few.
Yeah, it's been one of your biggest as well, isn't it, Jeff? It's one of the biggest books lengthwise.
It is, and because I remember Alfie saying to me at the very start when we did our first interview, he went, "Who's your uncle buy it, Jeff?" And I says, "Probably nobody," And he says, and we laughed, and I says, "I don't know." I says, "You don't market it as a Rangers book or a Celtic book. It's a Scottish football book, and as you said, one of the most controversial characters for obvious reasons. But they're usually the best stories to read, And it's also tinged with real sadness because his wife, who was his soulmate, the way she died, So, and I've met his son and his daughter through it, Stephen and Sam, and they're great, and their dad loves them, and they're very supportive of their dad, and there's a great family dynamic there as well. So everybody's been really pleased to see a sort of rejuvenated Alfie Conn, because he's really bought into the book, and he's been brilliant. He's been a cracking guy to work with.
Yeah, it's well worth a read, folks. I'd recommend it. And just before you go then, Jeff, it'd be rude not to ask you about how you feel about Rangers this term. I don't think there's a real good positive feeling at this moment in time about the squad and what they can go on and achieve. What have you made of it so far? Are they getting a result on Sunday? How's it going to unfold?
How long have we got? No, it's just, I was speaking to one of the boys last night at the do at Ibrox, and we were just, I always grew up, been watching Rangers since I was 10 and went to all the games. And I always went to the games. I never ever bothered about tactics, Derek. You would just bother about who was in the team. More often than not, we know 7 or 8 names that's going to be in the team. There seems to be an awful lot of chopping and changing at the moment. There seems to be a sort of a wee bit of a lack of desire, I think, from some players. I would say, especially the captain, who. Well, I've watched a lot of really good Rangers captains down the years, and I know we're in a different sphere at the moment because of the finances and stuff. But you don't have to be the best player in the world to have, a bit of blood and thunder about you. And when I look at Tav, sometimes if we go behind, the shoulders drop, and it looks as if he's struggling to motivate himself. Never mind the players round about him. Yeah. And I think he needs a rest. I think his best days are behind him, but I think he needs a rest, and I think it needs to be somebody else. It needs to be another captain, because I think the captain's job's quite important, although some people disagree.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. I'd be dropping him for Sunday. I don't think he's playing well enough for a starting spot. So, yeah, that's up to the manager. I think he's got some big calls to make ahead of that game on Sunday. But, yeah.
I have a lot of faith in him, Derek. I still think he's the man for the job.
So do I, yeah.
Clement. And I think he will do a good job. He's maybe got one hand tied behind his back at the moment, and it ain't an easy place to be. But he's a positive guy, and by all accounts, there was a Q&A at the stadium the night before last, and a lot of it was positive. And we can't just keep changing managers, and
I know,
because we're going to get Celtic will just get further and further ahead. Exactly. So we need to put down roots and start doing it and doing the business in the park, which is easier said than done, but. We just hope. We've lived through some terrible times, and this is one of them. So,
yep, I need to weather the storm, that's for sure. But brilliant. It's been great having you on, Jeff. Thank you for coming on. Great to have a chat as ever. And I wish you all the very best with the book as well. I'm sure it'll be a rip-roaring success.
Thanks very much, Derek. I appreciate that, and it's been a pleasure.
There you go, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And yeah, go and buy the book. And yeah, we'll speak to you a little later on. Bye for now.